Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Obviously, the new league year started officially Wednesday afternoon, but as we all know, Monday's the big day, and things were getting popped off since the last time that we talked, like going into the weekend, but ton of movement, of course, and a ton to unpack on today's show. So we're just going to kind of run through some of the biggest free agent signings, the movement, and how it kind of correlates to their draft position, to their ADP, and we'll just kind of rock it from there. But I wanted to start it off, Mario, with the quarterbacks, and I think this one might have been the most interesting as far as the money that he got, the landing spot, and just kind of what that means, with the Jets taking or going ahead, signing Justin Fields too. I thought a pretty lucrative deal, especially based on, how he looked last year, where, he kind of gets the rug pulled out from under him with Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh. But Jets are just kind of turning over this whole new leaf. And I feel like the Fields signing is kind of emblematic of that.
Yeah, it's a very, what would you call it? It's a kind of an all-in approach by Aaron Glenn. He's not trying to do this thing where it's halfway, making a competition between some retread vet and like a mediocre rookie quarterback and having them duke it out. It's like, I assume some of the calculus here for Aaron Glenn is that, knowing as he does the importance of team culture and sort of getting the players to buy in, I guess, maybe specifically under a leader, at least on offense, he's kind of clearing the runway a little bit for Fields to kind of give him breathing room on those fronts. And I think Glenn would know that it's not a slam dunk approach at all. It's not a likely good outcome in an objective sense, just because, like you said, I mean, Fields' production to this point is what it is, and it generally looks like he has pretty profound limitations with processing as a passer. But I kind of like Glenn's idea. I guess the disclaimer there, though, is like, I'm a fan of both Aaron Glenn, and I'm not like sold on Fields exactly, but I am a sympathizer. At the very least, I still think Justin Fields is clearly better than quarterbacks like Daniel Jones and a bunch of other clowns who have gotten way more chances and paid way more for doing less. So in that sense, I really do think Fields deserves some kind of spot in the league, or at least an opportunity like this. And I think Aaron Glenn knows enough, like they're going to have to make a run-heavy offense, maybe a low tempo offense, and they're going to need their defense to do some lifting to kind of bridge the gap between what Fields can actually do and what he can't do as a passer.
It's going to look a lot different. It looks like one of the downstream effects, and I'm not sure exactly where the ADP was relative to this prior to the signing, but Garrett Wilson is like a kind of mid-third rounder now.
Right. I can't remember for sure. He might have been going around that range anyway, because I guess unless you were a big Aaron Rodgers fan who was hoping he'd be back with the Jets, you probably weren't assuming great quarterback play in Wilson's situation either way. I think Justin Fields, I don't know, I won't say it's an upgrade for Garrett Wilson relative to Aaron Rodgers, but I really, really do not believe it's a downgrade. I am kind of optimistic that it is an upgrade, at least, because Justin Fields made DJ Moore extremely productive and Cole Kmet. So it's worth remembering Justin Fields can actually be an extremely accurate passer, and he can make all the throws. The problem is getting him to make his reads quickly enough to get himself in position to make these throws, or like get him in position to recognize the opportunity when it's on the field. But if you give Fields sort of like a flow chart offense, and maybe you have to make it somewhat simple in whatever respect to make it this way, but if you just give Fields kind of like a very foolproof list of instructions in a play and change the play design from something like look for the open spot, go through these reads and look for the open spot. Change it from that kind of language to something like take 3 steps and throw it here. That kind of just stuff, interpretation involved. And, to do that, you're going to have to do like a lot of jumbo play action kind of stuff, things that trick the defense into getting like a run defense look. So you can know or have reason to believe as a play caller, based on the pre-snap look and everything that, yeah, when he does the play action handoff and when he turns around, we can give him an instruction that's as simple as let it rip, without giving him sort of like qualifiers that slow down his processing and kind of throw off the rhythm of the whole design. It's just, of course, with an offense like that, you categorically need to be one of the least pass-happy offenses in the league. Like if you try to make Justin Fields just throw the ball 10 times in the first quarter from base play design dropbacks, you might as well just call like quarterback draws every time. Yeah,
no, that would not suit the skill set. That's not how to maximize it there. So it looked like Fields, the ADP, I'm certain it is rising, but like right now is like a 13th. But that's with a lot of backloaded.
That'll get higher.
Yeah, I'm thinking so.
In best ball,
are you going to be interested?
In best ball, it will get higher. In redraft, maybe it won't get higher, and maybe it shouldn't, because it's like trying to actually guess when Justin Fields' good games will occur. It's probably just not worth the effort, and it might not correlate to even the defensive details in any way. Justin Fields versus a good defense doesn't, and to me, have like a meaningfully different projection than Justin Fields versus a bad one, because you're still you're hoping he runs for like a 60-yard touchdown. And sure, bad defenses are more likely to give up a play like that than a good one. But the thing with Fields as a rushing threat is that he does occasionally catch the defenses in those spots where they just can't do anything about him as a runner. And if you line that up for him, and if you somehow as a defense by bad luck or some one guy slipping, whatever it is, get matched up one-on-one, and it's like this is the last line of the defense, there's a really good chance it's a touchdown, because Fields, he's big too. He's fast, but he's a 230 pounder. So if you're a one-on-one defender situation, you have to kind of like brace for the contact threat, like the power threat. So you have to like get a little bit low and sort of set to make a tackle attempt. And he's fast enough to just turn the corner on that player in that situation. So I really do think Fields can make that play against any defense. Like there's no category of defender in that situation who's in a good spot if it comes to that. So not that I actually forgot to check who the offensive coordinator is for the Jets. I assume whoever it is will be reporting extensively to Aaron Glenn, and Aaron Glenn's going to have a very hands-on, even as a defensive guy, will have a specific vision in mind. But Fields will not have big passing games by design, and the big running games are kind of subject to chance. So redraft, I'd hate to have to deal with that, but in best ball, Fields is best ball gold, because the fact that he might give you 2 points this week doesn't matter in the face of the fact that he might give you 40. And if it's the lower one, he's not in your lineup.
There we go. The old better in best ball, but regardless,
more than ever.
Yeah, man. So that was an interesting signing. Let's go to another quarterback signing that's sort of a flag plant of a new culture, turning over a new leaf. Pete Carroll goes ahead and brings in his old pal, Geno Smith. What do you think of his landing in Vegas?
Well, Geno's probably just like an average-ish starting quarterback, but in this league, this market at the moment, there's obviously a lot of value and demand for a player like Smith. So on the one hand, I don't think he's going to make the Raiders particularly competitive in that division, if only because of how tough that division is. But on the other, I think it's objectively a good, justifiable at the very least, if not good move for the Raiders, because I'm sorry, Aiden O'Connell is a backup. There's just nothing to do there. There's nothing to be done with that.
Oh, but dashing my hopes as a fellow mustache guy.
He's mustache rankings, mustache league. He is a great prospect. Huge. But so he'll clean up in that circuit whenever he gets to that part of his career. It's just in the meantime, it's like if you're Pete Carroll, obviously you got to give the team something. It's always going to be a what have you done for me lately league, and even the Raiders fans aren't going to want to be handed just a 2-15 season, no questions asked. So getting Geno averts that scenario, and I guess in the off chance that if presumably this would require quarterback injuries, so hopefully this basically doesn't happen. But if like the Chiefs or the Chargers are surprisingly bad or something like that, having Geno gives the Raiders a chance to sort of swoop in for the easy wild card spot or whatever. But I don't know if they're capable of much more than that, especially because they're in a consolidating process, right? Like they're not even to the actual rebuilding part. They're more like let's clear out the rot and like figure out how many like tools we even have to work with right now.
Yeah, exactly. And then, as it pertains to, it was kind of like obviously a narrowly channeled offense between, Bowers and Jacoby Myers last year. Does this help their cases at all in your mind?
It definitely helps. And I think the alternative could have, especially in Myers' case, the worst case alternative would have been potentially pretty damaging. I think Bowers, we can say at least like, you could put like Joel Staffe at quarterback, and Bowers would probably still have like 1,100 yards or whatever. But Myers, he's running a little bit further away from the line of scrimmage, a little bit more complex of routes. So Geno is big for Myers, and I do like Myers a lot. I think Myers it seems like no one ever disagrees with the Myers assessment, but the thing is always the same every year, where it's like, yeah, he's a really, really good value. You can't dislike it. And his price doesn't really seem to go up, even though we always think that. And I guess this year, especially if people are fading Geno, I plan to get a lot of Jacoby Myers.
I already have. So I've done a handful of these drafts, and I haven't done one yet this week post free agency getting opened up. But I did find myself kind of routinely going after one Jacoby Myers. So feeling good about that. Let's get over to the man replacing Geno Smith. That would be Sam Darnold. And I think that's in Seattle. And I think that's a fascinating one because, really, what do you make of last year where it was so good? We kept questioning the validity of it. And we get into late December, and it's like, wow, he really has the Vikings on the precipice of potentially, sniping the 1 seed in the NFC. This is crazy. How much of it has to do with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, KOC, running everything, and how much of it is Darnold just kind of finally getting a chance to flourish after having an impossible hand dealt to him in the first stanza of his career. Now we go to a place in Seattle that they've kind of cleared the decks as far as their pass catching group is concerned. So there's not going to be that upward sort of pressure on Darnold to kind of help him flourish. Can he do it himself a little bit?
I don't know. I don't think they're going to be able to throw the ball all that much. Even in Minnesota this year, Minnesota attempted many fewer passes than they did with Kirk Cousins. And I think, just look at those interceptions. Look at the playoff game, the last 2 games of the season, like you said. I think it's pretty clear why the Vikings threw the ball less. I don't think it was by chance. I know their defense was way better last year, but I think Kevin O'Connell knew, the more we go, the closer we get to 30 pass attempts, the more likely we are going to have Darnold just give away the game. So we have to figure out how to land our touchdown strikes in those first 25, 26 pass attempts. And clearly it worked really well, at least for a part of the year for the Vikings. And I think you can say Sam Darnold's really bad struggles before Minnesota weren't quite all his fault. Carolina and the Jets were ridiculous teams, both.
Yes.
So I think you can split the difference with his projection to Seattle. Like clearly the Darnold production from last year is gone, unless you're going to carry Justin Jefferson and whoever else to Seattle. It's just off the table. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, I'm sure, is going to have a huge year in PPR, but he's not going to be a threatening receiver. This is not a threatening offense. This is like the Seahawks are losing or otherwise just like don't have anything better to do on offense, but spin their wheels, just throwing, third and 9 completions that bring up 4th and 1. Like that's the kind of offense that you maybe can run with what the Seahawks have right now. And I'm not convinced as much as I like both Walker and Charbonnet, I'm not convinced the offensive line is really built to be a road grading unit right now. So I think the Seahawks are kind of just screwed, honestly. I assume this is sort of the median range opinion. I assume most people see it this way. But if I had to, off the top of my head, pick like 3 or 4 rosters that are the worst in the NFL, the Seahawks kind of pop up. I think their defense could be quite good, but that offense just sucks, I think. And I don't think it's as bad as the Carolina or Jets teams, but it's too far away from what Darnold had with the Vikings last year to be a safe spot for him. I think the jig is up, basically.
Now, I think that's a great point on JSN. You know, I think people are going to be going pretty crazy over him in drafts. Just, you know, not only
correctly so, in my opinion. I mean, he's going to catch like 140 passes. It's just like it's going to be for like 1,400 yards, and the Seahawks are going to go 2-15. You know.
Would you feel, dang, 2-15? Woof.
Well, something bad, something less than what they're hoping for right now.
Would you be comfortable with him in a half PPR end of the second round?
Smith-Njigba?
Yes.
Yes. I think the challenge for you would be to get him even that late. I think you're going to see a lot of Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, Ladd McConkey, JSN. Those guys, I think you're going to see fluctuate a fair amount from draft to draft, but always going very high. I just think you'll see sometimes JSN go even in the first round on Underdog.
Yeah, I've been gravitating towards Brian Thomas a lot.
And Neighbors are both really tough to. I wish you could like trade back up from the second and just take both of them.
Yeah, I've really liked getting like the later draft slot and just kind of I'll let the room kind of decide for me which guy I'm getting between Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, because I'm less interested in Achane at that point, even though I love Devin Achane. And Genty, I'm not. I don't know if I'm ready yet to
after
go with
those
the first round rookie.
You know, not over receivers that good. If it was a weaker receiver class, if you had to take like whatever. If you had to take like Rashee Rice in the second round, I'd say like, yeah, go ahead and take Genty instead.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it. Before we get on over to the
but
receivers,
not over legitimate first round receivers is what those other guys are, and that's a bit too much to Genty.
No, absolutely.
Before we get on over, sorry,
all good. Before we get on over to talking about some of the receivers, because they're a little bit more high profile this class than the running backs. You know, we didn't have Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs in this year's free agent class, but we'll get to them later. But first, we got a message from Edge Boost. Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost. $250,000 per day in debit deposits and unlimited withdrawals. Cashback on sports betting, DFS, and sweeps. You deposit $25, you get $25. 100% approval for all gaming activity. Financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming. Compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick-and-mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use promo code ROTOPOD. That's promo code ROTOPOD. You also got a quick message from our friends over at Simplecast. All right, now we are on over to the receivers. So Chris Godwin staying in Tampa Bay. But the big first kind of move, Davante Adams, now a Ram and Cooper Kupp. This was kind of in the works, cut loose by the Rams. So your thoughts on these two vets and you know, A, how does Adams fit with the Rams, and B, you know, where do you envision Kupp being a decent fit?
I don't know, and am I crazy? I thought I remembered seeing some people linking Kupp to let's see. So I guess there's a handful of teams. It's not just one or the other, but I saw the Seahawks listed, not to go back too much on the JSN point, but signing Kupp, if you're the Seahawks, would be legitimately insane. You cannot have two slot dependent receivers like that starting on the boundary. You're going to average under 7 yards a pass. It's a crazy idea. But on some other team, let's say, I don't know, what would it be? I don't think the Patriots is the best answer because I believe in DeMario Douglas, and I think if the Patriots look for reasons to take that guy off the field, they're kind of just setting themselves back. So not to rule out the possibility of Kupp going to the Seahawks or Patriots, I just don't think it'd be like in the best interest of either of the two sides in those cases. Adam Schefter mentioning that Kupp might go to the Broncos. That's a little more interesting to me. I guess I would wonder how many snaps they plan to keep allotted for Marvin Mims, who I think has clearly earned a 3-down role at this point. Ridiculously long as it took to get there. But the Devon Vele part is the tough one because I thought he did some pretty good stuff as the slot guy, and he's already 27 or whatever, so you can't just be like, hey, go back to, we're going to put you back on the red shirt, Devon, and when you're 31 and Cooper Kupp retires, we'll cut you because you're too slow then. But I think if Kupp goes to the Broncos, I don't know. There's like Sutton's enough of a boundary guy, and Marvin Mims is enough of a boundary / downfield kind of guy. There might be room for Kupp to make some noise in that kind of setup, depending on how much Sean Payton and him can work out like an option route tree, whatever, from the slot. Because that's what really let Kupp go nuts with the Rams, right? Is like those option routes with Matt Stafford, and he's going to be more dependent than ever on option routes now that Kupp is probably running something like a 4.7 40.
Right. So that you worry that the end could be nigh for Kupp.
But there is a way he could have like a whatever, like Adam Thielen type bounce back with the Broncos, I think. But yeah, just not the Seahawks and not the Patriots. I don't really see it those places.
Yeah, I was not like over the moon with any of the places that may or may not have been interested in him. But as far as Adams coming to town, big upgrade.
Bigger deal. Yeah. Davante Adams to the Rams is quite interesting. I think it's just being Davante Adams, it dictates that he will get a ton of usage to the extent that I think it has to be seen as bad news for Puka Nacua. Like there's two possibilities. I feel like Puka Nacua becomes suddenly hazardous at cost, and his projection, especially relative to the last 2 years of production, takes a big hit, or the Rams are just abysmal and the Davante Adams signing is a huge bust. Because think about how much they are kind of reconfiguring to make room, the proper room for a guy like Adams and the talents that he offers, these substantial talents that he offers. You can't run the Rams offense the same way you have the past couple of years. You can't ask Davante Adams to be Cooper Kupp. You can't ask Davante Adams to even be Puka Nacua. The kind of like kamikaze run blocking stuff those guys do in that offense, I don't think it's really like it's beneath Adams's pay grade, basically. And moreover, I feel like those routes that they were cooking up so many of for Puka Nacua from the boundary, those some substantial number of those just have to go to Adams. And I don't know what that means in that case. Does that mean Puka Nacua moves into the slot on some of these plays and they try to establish like a new, more in the region where Cooper Kupp was running at his peak? Do they move Nacua there and try to get him going on similar looks while getting Davante Adams on the boundary to give them this, unique boundary threat that they haven't had in this stretch? I don't know for sure, but I feel like one thing we know is like Davante Adams won't be playing that Cooper Kupp role. It's just beneath him. Or at least it wouldn't work if they tried it. And so I'm thinking Adams has a pretty big year, and it's mostly bad news for Nacua, if anything.
Yeah, and like you said, kind of like hazardous at cost when it comes to Nacua. I thought that was a good way of framing it. Like Nacua is like a top 8 pick right now on
those other
Underdog.
Receivers, John. It's like Neighbors, Thomas, even McConkey. Like I don't know. I wouldn't want to. I'd rather almost go with those guys all.
I think I would as well. So yeah, and then with Nacua, I love watching that guy play. Like absolutely one of my favorites. But I
Yeah.
feel like the durability concern always kind of like moves me off of him in these drafts. And now, like you said, with Adams coming to town, it complicates things even further potentially. What did you make of DK Metcalf being on the move to Pittsburgh?
It's definitely the kind of signing the Steelers needed to make in a trade, I guess it's to me, Metcalf is a really valuable player. I know that he has some limitations, and those limitations are real. Those limitations being Metcalf cannot be like a healthy 110 catch receiver for you. If your offense for some reason gets 110 receptions to Metcalf, you probably had a bunch of turnovers and were like you were running a ton of plays from 3rd and 10 and more, because Metcalf can't be a high catch rate guy. You know, he maybe has like a 66% catch rate season in him. But for him to maintain a catch rate that high, you have to keep Metcalf in situations where he's especially comfortable. And there are some situations, I guess you'd say, sort of underneath, maybe over the middle of the field. Metcalf's hands, coordination, whatever, are just not quite good enough to make him reliable there. And if you try to force his usage there, you'll sort of like a lot of Seahawks fans have become disenchanted with DK Metcalf, and it was basically because they were just kind of like, oh, he can't do the things that Jaxon, Smith-Njigba can. I was like, well, so is true the opposite or the vice versa or whatever. And that's what I think a lot of people miss with Metcalf is like, yeah, he can't do these things underneath as well as some other receivers. But in terms of dictating a downfield threat that draws the attention of at least one and sometimes both of the safeties, Metcalf is in his own category, basically. I mean, a 233 pounder running a 4.33 at 6'4" is absurd. Like Terrell Owens was not that huge and fast. So Metcalf, in a way, can be bad at receiver stuff and still be a really dangerous receiver because he's playing a different game than everybody else. And in the context of the Steelers offense, you know, this run heavy offense that tries to get the downfield passes going, specifically leveraged off of that run threat and the defense's response to it. It's like Metcalf on a, let's say, 120 target role this year would be, at once it would limit his fantasy upside, and I can imagine some people complaining about how he's not drawing enough targets or whatever, but it would maximize his efficiency. And in the context of the Steelers offense, if you're or the Steelers roster overall, if you're presuming that their defense is some version of good, if you're presuming that their run game is some version of good, adding Metcalf there is a really big step toward building kind of like the next pillar, you know? And I think it's not ideal for his fantasy prospects, but it is a really good pickup for the Steelers.
And, you know, I think, you know, we talk about this a decent bit, but, you know, just like adding the threat of somebody across from someone who's already kind of putting strain on the defense, like as far as you're rolling out two receivers, like, I mean, how scared are defenses? Do you think there's a chance they don't?
I don't know. It's definitely the case that Pickens is crazy, you know, you knew that, but it's a lot of football players, a lot of athletes are crazy, and like their mania is sometimes specifically part of why they're as good as they are. So George Pickens, with that said, like there's a line, you know, like Mike Tomlin definitely has a line that he won't tolerate. They didn't tolerate it with Chase Claypool, and Chase Claypool wasn't even like that crazy. He just wasn't good enough to be as annoying as he was. Whereas with Pickens, they're like, God, I wish this guy wasn't so good at receiver because we just want to cut him, but he's too good. We can't do it. So depending on how that line is straddled and how the Steelers feel about it. By the way, if the Steelers do get Aaron Rodgers, which whatever, I don't know if that's like moving the needle a whole lot for the Steelers, but if they do, I think maybe then you can take it a little more likely that they keep Pickens, just because if you're tolerating Pickens and it's under the condition of, but you might win a Super Bowl, it makes you a lot more willing to go along with it. Whereas like if you're a rebuilding team, if you're kind of like in a rebuilding mode, or if the Steelers feel like they are, that I think makes them more likely to sell Pickens for, 75 cents on every dollar of talent that he clearly has a lot of.
Yeah, no, he's a mercurial guy, no doubt. Most of us Georgia Bulldogs are. What can you do? We got a interesting question from Jamie, circling back to the Rams discussion. any concern that there's a cliff coming for Davante Adams the same way that we saw with DeAndre Hopkins?
It's definitely a reasonable fear. He's going to be 33 Christmas Eve. So that's that normally brings a pretty certain cliff. And as you know, the Hopkins example raises, it's a reasonable concern that even a guy who was formerly elite or elite as recently as last year might all of a sudden just not look like a real football player anymore. I think, though, and I am having to kind of, read between the lines a little bit and definitely leaning on faith to some extent too. But I look at the target rate for Adams from last year, and it's just kind of, it's too high. And I mean, it's too high in the sense that, like, I can't question him. Not right now. The target rate, 114 on 570 snaps with the Jets, 27 targets with the 3 games for the Raiders. Also, the level of pay that he has with the Rams, it's like $23 million a year. I know that's not the former pay rate for a guy like Adams, but it still makes him one of the most expensive receivers in the league. And if that target rate gets cut in half, I still think it puts him in like the 90 catch conversation. And think about how crazy that would be. Like, you can say his target rate could get cut in half and he would still be pushing for, whatever, wide receiver 2 kind of status in fantasy. So Adams could fall off. It could just be a plain old bad idea by the Rams. But if Adams is even like 3/4 of what he was last year, he's valuable in his own right and probably a bit of an issue for Nacua relative to Nacua's extremely high standards from the last few years.
Yeah, no, there just weren't that many indicators that Adams was cooked, and obviously, like the Rams aren't paying him this way. If he was, so I think that those are good calls,
or they're very wrong.
Like margin
like those
for
are
error.
The 2 possibilities. It's like they're wrong and screwed, or Adams is still kind of some version of himself that we might recognize.
Indeed. Did you have anything else to add on the Steelers front before we maybe move on to the second half of Jamie's question when it comes to Hopkins?
Najee Harris being gone is pretty interesting for Jaylen Warren. I assume they're going to add someone else, but Najee Harris being out of the way is a big deal for Warren, obviously.
I believe they've added Kenny Gainwell.
Oh, well, I consider that little more than a speed bump. I like Gainwell enough. It's just that Gainwell, the workhorse, is playing in like a Mike Leach offense. Jaylen Warren, the workhorse, we already saw at Utah State and Oklahoma State. He can rebrand a little bit. Jaylen Warren was sort of playing out of the bullpen while they had Najee Harris, but now it's just like, okay, yeah, he's gonna take a few miles per hour off his fastball, but we're gonna work him in as a starter this year, kind of thing.
Very apt analogy that this time of year. Before we get on over to DeAndre Hopkins, we do have a message from our pals over at Pool Genius. Want to win more in your golf, March Madness, and football pools? Well, Pool Genius gives you data-driven picks and strategies to outsmart the competition. With over a decade of analytics and historical data, Pool Genius is the only site dedicated exclusively to helping people win sports pools, with Pool Genius users winning 3 times more often than expected. RotoWire listeners get exclusive offers. Visit poolgenius.com/RotoWire for up to 55% off or start a 4-day free trial. That's poolgenius.com/RotoWire. Moving on, DeAndre Hopkins to Baltimore. What did you make of that? I did see you tweeting about it a little bit.
Right. So I was kind of complaining, but referencing something we previously complained about, which was how, for some reason, John, you know better than me how many years back this has gone. I'm mostly remembering it from the Odell Beckham year. But since at least the Odell Beckham year, the Ravens front office has had this weird insistence, this morbid curiosity and like retread formerly elite, but I'm hoping this is not the case with Hopkins, but clearly toast formerly elite receivers. And they would sign them on these 1-year deals. I couldn't tell what the aim was. Was it purely a locker room culture kind of signing? Was it purely to someone to give advice to the younger receivers who they're actually going to give the playing time for? Last year it took a little while, but they got Deontay Johnson kind of under that model, and he literally didn't play. So I guess you can't call it quite a failure of the same nature. but they got nothing for their trouble both times.
Correct.
It seems in the case of the Hopkins signing that they're kind of just going back for more on that one, and maybe they are, but I don't know. I'm still a bit of a Hopkins truther at this point. I feel like he was playing well for the Chiefs last year, and I think he was clearly playing well for the Titans before that. But the Chiefs offense just had no, in my opinion, the Chiefs offense had no sincere intention of letting Hopkins play. Like they just decided, sorry, understandably enough, they wanted Worthy on the field, and then less understandably to me, they insisted on having Juju Smith-Schuster in the slot. It's like I think as disappointing as last year was for Hopkins, it's not, in my opinion, it's not slam dunk evidence that he's truly toast. It's not, in my opinion, as concerning as the way like Odell Beckham looked before he got to the Ravens, in other words. And I never liked Deontay Johnson that much, so I never got optimistic about his case.
Yeah, that's on record.
Yeah, but yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, if he can be just more or less the guy that we know as DeAndre Hopkins, I think that could be pretty dangerous with Lamar Jackson, actually, because it'd be like a bit role, right? He's not going to be, I wouldn't even assume Hopkins puts heat on Bateman. He won't put heat on Flowers. So if he's only playing in 3 wide sets, that means it's kind of trending toward like hurry up or end of half catching up situations. And I feel like if you have Hopkins running from the boundary, kind of in a, I don't know what you'd call it, like an ISO kind of receiver where it's just, he's probably not getting the double teams anymore, but as long as he doesn't, Hopkins has always been a guy who can make a catch even though he's covered, you know?
Exactly.
So if you say like he's slow, it's like I don't know, maybe he is.
He was never fast.
Yeah, it's like as long as he can still do the hand fighting stuff at the top of the route and, you know, while high pointing a target, if he's singled up, I think that play is there, especially when they need a first down or something. If they're not expecting Hopkins to carry the passing game, I don't think he can hurt them. And I think some of the utilities that he gives them is something new. I don't think Flowers can affect the boundary the way Hopkins can. Bateman, I still think is a pretty useful player, but it's just there are some weak points in his game too. And I think you'd say they're like catching at the point of attack kind of stuff. It's like Bateman, you worry about dropping a pass because he got ragdolled because he's kind of like skinny and not that strong at the catch point. But DeAndre Hopkins is like, he just, you know, magnet hands when he's getting those one-on-one looks. So if a defense leaves that one-on-one look and it's like the third read for Lamar and it gets them a first down in a play where it's like maybe they were hoping Flowers or a tight end was getting open downfield, but maybe they mostly just needed a first down, or maybe it's specifically it's like it's 3rd and 6. We need a first down. You get to the line of scrimmage. You see pre-snap that Hopkins is in single coverage. You just option hot route it, get the first down, go back to the base offense again. Like it might be something like that. So I'm not expecting a big fantasy season from Hopkins, but I think he could be like a really good contributor for what they're trying to do there. And he could have his moments. I don't mean to write this guy off. I really don't.
No, I think if nothing else, to your point, that they've done the veteran retreads for years now. I still shudder to think of Des Bryant in a Ravens uniform. Like that was.
Oh, right.
That was sad.
That was the other one. Ugh.
That was sad for everybody.
I'm getting mad about it again. Yeah.
Des, don't do this. And also Ravens don't do this. But
this is the one time. This is the Ravens. It's like you can use that. It's like you can use that Tobias Funke meme about maybe for us it'll work. And it's like, I'm unironically saying that with the Hopkins one. I'm like, look, admittedly, the last 50 times this was a stupid idea, but this one is smart.
I think just like in other cases, they didn't have two like legitimately established, good starting wide receivers in those previous cases. Now they do. So they're simply asking Hopkins to be an upgrade over Nelson Aguilar or Tylan Wallace or Anthony Miller like we saw in the postseason. So it gives them some needed depth. Like you said, I think that he still has the skill set, that the hands in particular, to be a useful asset within this offense. And I think if people are grading too sharply what happened to him last year, it's like, okay, he was on the Titans and then he has to join the Chiefs mid-season. And yes, the Chiefs are really shorthanded, but
well.
Yes. So I don't understand why everyone thinks he's like
numbers
so
Chiefs. like with the Titans, he was a totally decent above baseline starting target, and with the Chiefs, he was targeted on a really high per snap rate. It's just the Chiefs literally decided, we don't want a receiver who does this. We want a receiver who clears room for Travis Kelce. We don't want first downs from the receiver. We want first downs from the tight end. And they went with Worthy.
Yeah, interesting. And I don't know if anybody was going to beat the Eagles in hindsight in the Super Bowl, but the way that they played it out certainly wasn't
bad ideas. They did not do that well. I think we can go so far as to say they could have done a little better than that.
I would hope so. Let's see. Last receiver to discuss here. What do you think of Christian Kirk getting traded in division? And what do you think just kind of generally about this Houston Texans, off season thus far that's really kind of seen them just send off pretty much their whole offensive line from last year?
Right. It's not great. I think Caserio has lost his mind pretty much entirely. And I like the Kirk pickup, though. It's just one of those things, like, he was going to be a free agent, so it's a free agent signing. I just think it's a good one. Christian Kirk, in my opinion, is a solid, like, 55 grade receiver. Maybe you'd say 55 in the slot, 50 on the boundary, something like that. And I think Nico Collins is awesome. So I would imagine CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Christian Kirk is pretty imposing for any defense. But the offensive line part, as you were alluding to, is a really huge issue. And Caserio, the GM, I almost wonder. I don't have a sense of whether the interests of DeMeco Ryans are at all diverged from Caserio. I don't know if they're kind of like if they're not truly, a tandem, then maybe part of the really aggressive turnover is kind of just Caserio consolidating control, because the firing of Slowick was weird. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not expecting that to be like another Joe Brady situation, but there's no way Slowick is that bad. It's a stupid like the Texans offense wasn't that bad relative to what you would project for the personnel that they had last year. If you knew, like, yeah, the offensive line sucks, Diggs is going to get hurt, Dell is going to get hurt, Dalton Schultz sucks, and maybe you already knew that, and then you project all that, and you wouldn't have reason at that point to say this is a good offense. You would have reason to say this is a bad offense. And so if the offense is bad, it's not Slowick that you can attribute it to. It's nonsense. You would expect it based on the personnel. You blame the personnel, not the coach. The personnel is Caserio's discretion, prerogative. So I'm wondering if Slowick kind of, especially did you notice how the Texans stopped using a fullback this year?
Yeah.
They were using a fullback kind of like a true Shanahan offense. They were using Andrew Beck the way the Shanahan offense used check, and then they just didn't use it. They signed Diggs, and they cut the fullback position to have the slot rep for Diggs. And I almost wonder, is like, was there some butting heads between Slowick having one vision and Caserio another, and maybe, I don't know, maybe Slowick ran his mouth or something at a Houston area bar a little too much, and it got back to Caserio about how he was pissed off about this or that the GM did. I don't know, but it sure didn't seem like one of those firings that happens for the job performance, even if you found it disappointing,
Yeah, like yes, it was underwhelming, because we all just thought, how do things go in the NFL? Clearly, if they're this good as a rookie, then it's just going to keep going up. But that just is, stuff isn't linear like that. You just don't always
other things go wrong.
Massive leaps forward. Exactly. So, like, they still made the second round of the playoffs. Like, the end result was still the same as the amazing 2023 season.
So yeah, it's a strange situation to me. And then throwing out the entire offensive line at once, it feels to me like something. It feels like a scapegoating kind of thing, right? Because on the one hand, sure, these offensive linemen clearly were not good last year. On the other, the guy cutting them acquired all of them. So if aside from Tunsil, I guess Tunsil was already there, they traded for him from the Dolphins. Anyway, I think pretty clearly Caserio is just doing this thing where it's like the blame was issued on the offensive line, and now he's kind of like leaning into that narrative, getting rid of all of them to just kind of reinforce the narrative that's like, see that offensive line that was the problem last year? I got rid of it. Look what I did. And now I guess we wait to see just how many more tricks Caserio has, how many more lives he has left, because now he actually has to fix this problem that he made and has temporarily successfully blamed on other people than himself. But now now it's like that leash is, the clock is ticking again, and it's hard. It's basically impossible, actually, to make a good offensive line from scratch in one offseason, because a big part of good offensive line play in the first place is continuity. You get guys to just play better together the longer they play together, regardless of their talent levels. And if you want to just start from total scratch, Titus Howard is, I guess, the only Titus Howard, and maybe Blake Fisher if you count him. He was kind of a backup last year, but replacing 3/5 of the line, including the one who is by far the best in Tunsil. I think Stroud and those receivers and Ryans keep that team competitive, but I think Caserio's, if I'm correctly attributing these developments to the appropriate people, I think Caserio is basically a weight around all of their necks.
Yeah, and I think as an extension of this offensive line stuff, I think I'm like going to jump ship on Mixon. Mixon was extremely profitable for the first.
It was nice while it lasted.
Yep, it was great. I thought I was the biggest of the brain geniuses, but did not carry me to the titles at the end. But if you got you there, someone else can step up. Your Chuba Hubbards of the world, and Jonathan Taylor's crushing it at the end of the season. As we wrap it up here, just going to kind of throw out a grab bag to you. Anything else that's really kind of caught your eye through this first week of the new league year?
No, can't really. Sorry, think of anything else. Yeah, sure. We'll have a lot to say further about kind of like best ball markets and stuff like that as they shape up. I assume we're going to see a lot of kind of what do you call it? Solidifying or whatever, taking shape in these. Now that we've seen this news kind of settle, we're going to see people kind of making new bets, and hopefully we can have a lot more to say yet.
Yeah, the movement is still kind of like ongoing. This is kind of one of those moments along the best ball draft season that shakes things up, and things will settle back in with the new ADPs here in time for next week's episode, because people are always drafting, so the markets should start solidifying there. But that's going to do it for us on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, again brought to you by our friends over at Edge Boost and over at Pool Genius. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.